Okay, so I'm Van Wallach. I live here in Katona. And every time I hear a mention of the border wall, it brings a shock of recognition to me. This is because I grew up in Mission, Texas, right on the border, which is exactly where part of the wall is going through. It's going through south of Mission, right on the Rio Grande, and it goes through areas that I know very well. There's the Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park where I've gone, there's the National Butterfly Center, and then there's the La Lamita Chapel, which is a small Catholic church, which actually gave Mission its name. So every time I hear the wall, it evokes a lot of emotions for me. It's weird to see my hometown actually in the news every day. And given the role of the border wall in the national government shutdown, then the place is even more notorious than ever. Plus, if you ever watch the A&E show Live PD, the Mission Police Department is featured on it. So that's like yet another way of seeing what goes on where I grew up. So the idea of moving among countries is very familiar to me, as is the idea of staying in place. I can actually look at that issue from both sides of my family, depending on what side of my family life I want to focus on. On my father's side of the family, there's been a high degree of wanderlust for many years. My father and I were born in 3 different countries. My grandfather was born in the Ukraine, my father was born in the United States, and I was born in France when my parents were living in France in the 1950s. So just some background, my grandparents were sort of the typical Eastern European Jews who got out of Eastern Europe when the getting was good, escaping the pogroms and the poverty. My father was born in St. Louis in 1925, and he had a sense of wandering that made him go back to Europe in the 1950s after he married my mother in Texas. So my younger brother and I were both born at a U.S. Air Force hospital in the south of France, where my father had moved to try to get involved in the automobile racing industry, making steering wheels, going to Le Mans and races like that. Then my parents' marriage failed, and my mother brought my brother and I back to Mission, Texas, where she grew up, and so the sense of place was right there. So as that story tells, there's a strong sense of being in a particular geography on my mother's side of the family. I can't think of anybody in my mother's family, in fact, who actually left Texas other than me. And I came to live in the Northeast about 40 years ago. Everybody wanted to stay down there. The first family members came from Germany and settled in New York in the 1840s. And then they were in Texas by the 1860s. I actually had one great relative, grandfather, who was a Union cavalryman in the Civil War. So they all stayed there, and one of them was even the first ordained rabbi in Texas, Chaim Schwartz, who moved from Germany to Texas in 1873. There he is. He's on all the books about Texas jewelry. So maybe there's a resemblance. So he moved, and from 1873 to now, let's move ahead 150 years. I can't even mention how many great-great-greats there is, but my brother's grandchildren, River and Sawyer, are having their 2nd birthday today. And they live in a town called Katy, Texas, which is just 35 miles away from where Rabbi Schwartz settled in Hempstead, Texas. So that marks, according to my calculation, the 7th generation to be living in the state. So that's a pretty stable, rooted population. So when I see the wall, I can kind of look at it from both sides. So I can see people who moved from a place maybe where they had lived for a long time looking for a different life. And I can see it from the point of view of people who have lived in a particular area for a very long time, who see change as very disruptive for their way of life. So the way I look at it, that's been the pattern of humanity for hundreds of thousands of years. You know, you can either move away or stay and fight. You can invade or repel. You can conquer or resist. You can assimilate or stand apart. You can cooperate, or you can remain in conflict. While the border wall may be a new idea in the news right now, the emotions that it evokes are really ancient. They've been around since we were telling stories around a campfire or standing around, walking on the road next to a river in Babylon. As for me, I'm thinking maybe the time has come to apply for an EU passport. Since I was born in France, I might as well get it. You never know when circumstances may change, and a sense of wanderlust will hit me for reasons that I can't even imagine right now. So, thank you.